The Wyoming sun was a merciless hammer, beating down on the cracked earth of Jebediah Stone's ranch. At 72, Jeb felt every year of his life in the ache of his bones, a dull throb that kept rhythm with the dry, rasping wind. His land, once a hopeful expanse of a few hundred acres, had shrunk in spirit, mirroring his own dwindling resources. The fences sagged. The paint on his small clapboard house had been surrendering to the elements for over a decade, and his cattle were more bone than beef. He was checking the western fence line, a task as relentless as the sun itself, when he saw it, a shimmer of color that didn't belong. Not the muted brown of a pronghorn or the dusty gray of sagebrush. It was a flicker of deep turquoise and red, low to the ground. He squinted, his pale blue eyes watering from the glare. Cautiously, he changed his path, his worn leather boots crunching on the parched soil. As he got closer, the shape resolved itself. It was a girl, no older than 15, slumped against a fence post. Her dark hair was matted with dust, her face streaked with the clean tracks of recent tears. She wore a simple cotton dress, and a piece of turquoise jewelry glinted at her neck. She was Native American, likely from the nearby Wind River Reservation, but she was miles from any main road. One of her ankles was swollen and unnaturally angled. Her lips were cracked, a testament to a long time without water. She watched him approach, her dark eyes wide with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. She tried to push herself up, to run, but a sharp intake of breath and a wince of pain kept her grounded. Jeb stopped a respectful 10 feet away, holding up a hand in a gesture of peace. He said nothing, simply unhooked the dented metal canteen from his belt. He uncapped it and took a short sip himself to show it was safe before extending it towards her. His movements were slow, deliberate. "Water," he said, his voice raspy, unused for most of the day. "It's just water." The girl stared, her gaze flicking from his weathered face to the canteen and back again. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind. Then, with a trembling hand, she reached out and took it. After the girl finished drinking, Jebediah pointed a gnarled finger toward her ankle, which was visibly swollen and discolored against her skin. He raised his eyebrows in a silent question. She flinched slightly when his gaze fell upon it, pulling her leg back. Jebediah held up his hands, palms open, a universal sign of peace. He then pointed to himself, then to the faint silhouette of his ranch house on the horizon, and finally back to her ankle, mimicking a gentle wrapping motion with his hands. He couldn't leave her out here, a lamb for the wolves or the unforgiving elements. She watched him, her dark eyes weighing his intentions. His face, etched with the lines of a hard life, held no deceit, only a quiet, weary concern. After a long moment, she gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. Getting to her feet was a struggle, and a sharp hiss of pain escaped her lips as she put weight on the injured foot. Without a word, Jebediah moved to her side, offering a sturdy, weathered arm. She hesitated for a second before placing her hand on his forearm, her small fingers barely wrapping around it. The walk back was painstakingly slow. The sun beat down, and the only sounds were the crunch of their boots on the dry earth and the girl's occasional, sharp intake of breath. As they approached, the poverty of Jebediah's home became starkly clear. The wood of the small house was bleached gray by the sun, the paint having peeled away decades ago. The barn leaned tiredly to one side, a testament to years of neglect born from necessity, not laziness. Yet, as he led her through the front door, she saw that the inside, though sparse, was immaculately clean. A single wooden table, 2 chairs, and a stone hearth were the main features. He guided her to one of the chairs, its legs wobbly but sound. He disappeared for a moment, returning with a basin of warm water, a clean rag, and a small tin of a dark, pungent salve. Kneeling before her, his old joints cracking in protest, he gently submerged her foot in the water, his touch as careful as if he were handling a fragile bird. A silent understanding passed between them, a fragile trust forged in the quiet humility of his home. After securing the bandage, Jebediah's own stomach let out a low growl, a stark reminder of the setting sun. He looked at the girl, whose dark eyes were fixed on him, a mixture of weariness and exhaustion. If she was as thirsty as he'd found her, she must be starving. He pushed himself up with a grunt, his old joints protesting, and made his way to his sparse pantry. The shelves were a testament to his lean existence. A single can of beef stew, half a loaf of stale bread, and some coffee. It wasn't much, but it was everything. Without hesitation, he opened the can and warmed the stew on his small cast-iron stove. The humble aroma of beef and vegetables soon filled the one-room cabin, a comforting scent against the growing chill of the evening. He split the meal into 2 bowls, placing one on the small wooden table in front of her. For a moment, she just stared at it. Then, slowly, she picked up the spoon he'd provided and began to eat. They ate in a silence that was no longer tense, but filled with a quiet, shared understanding. As they finished, Jebediah felt a need to bridge the gap between them with more than just gestures. He tapped his own chest with a weathered finger. "Jebediah," he said, his voice raspy. He repeated the name, pointing to himself again. The girl watched him, her gaze thoughtful. A moment passed, then she mirrored his action, placing a small hand on her chest. "Ahita," she whispered, the name a soft, melodic sound in the quiet cabin. A rare, genuine smile creased Jebediah's face. "Ahita." Outside, the last sliver of light vanished, and the wind began to howl, rattling the window panes. It was settled, she couldn't travel in this state, in this darkness. He gestured toward his only bed, a simple cot in the corner with a worn quilt. "You sleep," he said, patting the mattress. Ahita looked from the bed to him, a question in her eyes. He pointed to his old rocking chair by the fading fire. "I hear," he assured her. Understanding and gratitude washed over her face. She carefully made her way to the bed and lay down, pulling the old quilt up to her chin. Jebediah added a log to the fire and settled into his chair, the creak of the wood a familiar comfort as he began his watch. A cold ache in his joints was the first thing Jebediah felt as the pale light of dawn crept through the window. He had drifted in and out of a shallow sleep in his rocking chair, his old bones protesting the awkward position. His first glance went to the bed, where Ahita lay still, breathing softly under the patched quilt. A wave of relief washed over him. She was safe. He pushed himself up, his back groaning in complaint, and shuffled to the window, intending to check the sky for rain. But it wasn't the sky that caught his attention. His heart stopped. Darted across the landscape, emerging like apparitions from the thin morning mist, were riders, dozens of them. They sat motionless on their horses, forming a silent, imposing circle around his small ranch. They weren't armed for a raid with rifles drawn, but their presence was an overwhelming display of power. Their faces were grim, their eyes fixed on his cabin. This wasn't a random group. This was a delegation, a force to be reckoned with. Jebediah's blood ran cold. His first instinct was fear, a raw, primal urge to bolt the door and hide. But then he looked back at the sleeping girl. Fear was a luxury he couldn't afford. He was her protector. As he watched, one man, clearly an elder with a stern, weathered face and long, graying braids, dismounted with a fluid grace that defied his age. He began walking toward the cabin, his steps deliberate and heavy with authority. Every eye was on him. Jebediah took a deep, shaky breath. He couldn't meet this man with a weapon. That would only invite violence. With his heart hammering against his ribs, he opened the creaking door and stepped onto the porch. He stood there, a frail old man in worn clothes, and waited. The elder stopped at the foot of the wooden steps, his dark eyes searching Jebediah's, the silence of the vast Wyoming plains stretching between them. The elder stopped a few feet from the porch steps, his dark eyes scrutinizing Jebediah, missing nothing from his weathered face to his calloused, empty hands. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken threats. The rising sun cast long shadows, painting the scene in stark tones of orange and black. Finally, the man spoke, his voice a low rumble that carried the weight of authority. "You have taken a child of the Lakota. Where is she?" Jebediah's heart hammered against his ribs, but his voice came out surprisingly steady. "She's inside. She's safe." He gestured with his head toward the cabin door. "She was hurt. Found her by the south fence yesterday. Ankle was swollen, something fierce. All I did was give her water and a place to rest." The elder's expression remained stony, unconvinced. "You are a white man on stolen land. Your words mean little." He took another step forward, his hand resting near a knife on his belt. The warriors behind him shifted, a subtle but menacing ripple of movement. Just as the tension reached its breaking point, the cabin door creaked open. Aida stood there, silhouetted in the doorway, her eyes blinking in the morning light. She saw the elder, and a look of pure relief washed over her face. "Tankashila, grandfather," she cried out, her voice clear and strong. She limped quickly across the porch, ignoring the pain in her ankle, and rushed into the old man's arms. He enveloped her in a fierce hug, his stern facade melting away to reveal a deep, desperate love. He spoke to her softly in their native tongue, his questions urgent. Aida answered just as rapidly, pointing back at Jebediah, then lifting her foot to show him the clean bandage wrapped around her ankle. She spoke at length, her tone earnest, recounting the water, the food, the gentle care, the safe bed. As he listened, the chief, for that was who he was, slowly raised his eyes to meet Jebediah's. The suspicion was gone, replaced by something Jebediah hadn't expected, a profound and humbling flicker of gratitude. The chief nodded slowly, a silent acknowledgement that changed everything. The standoff was over. The air, once thick with unspoken threats, now felt light. Chief Tahatan slowly turned from his granddaughter, his gaze resting on Jebediah. The lines of suspicion on his face had softened into deep creases of respect. He took a deliberate step forward, his eyes scanning not just the old man, but the world he inhabited. He saw the cracked earth, thirsty for rain. He saw the peeling paint on the cabin walls and the patched roof struggling against the elements. He saw the nearly empty water barrel by the door, and his understanding deepened. This man had given his granddaughter water when he barely had enough for himself. Tahatan spoke in his native tongue, his voice a low, resonant rumble. Aida, standing between them, translated, her own voice filled with relief. "My grandfather thanks you. He says you have a strong heart, like a mountain that stands against the wind." Jebediah simply nodded, feeling a lump form in his throat. He had never been one for praise. "Just did what was right," he mumbled, his voice raspy. The chief's eyes, wise and ancient, moved from the barren fields back to Jebediah. He spoke again, a longer, more thoughtful series of words. "He sees your land is suffering," Ida translated. "He sees the sky has not been kind to you. He says a gift of thanks must be more than words." The chief pointed a steady finger toward the dry, dusty patch of ground where Jebediah's old well had long since failed. "Kindness should be answered with life. Water is life. My people, we will dig you a new well. We will find the deep water for you." Jebediah was stunned into silence. He looked from the chief to the dozens of strong men still sitting on their horses, their once intimidating presence now transformed into an astonishing offer of help. He, a man who had always relied on himself, was being offered a lifeline he never could have forged alone. I can't ask you to do that," he stammered, overwhelmed. Tahatan placed a firm, weathered hand on Jebediah's shoulder. He spoke directly to him in broken, heavily accented English. "Not ask, we do. For Aida, for a friend." The word friend hung in the air, sealing a pact more powerful than any treaty. The days that followed transformed the silent, dusty ranch into a hive of purposeful activity. Guided by Chief Tahatan's wisdom, the men worked with a rhythmic efficiency that awed Jebediah. Their bare hands and simple tools moved earth with a speed his own weary arms could never match. He worked alongside them, his old shovel biting into the cracked soil, his sweat mingling with theirs, under the relentless Wyoming sun. Language was a barrier, but shared labor became its own dialect. A nod, a shared swig of water from a ladle, a moment of rest in the sliver of shade cast by the barn, these were their conversations. Aida, her ankle now healing, acted as a cheerful go-between, her laughter a constant melody against the percussion of digging. On the third afternoon, a shout went up. The soil at the bottom of the deep pit had turned dark and slick. Hope, potent and electric, surged through the group. With renewed vigor, they dug deeper. Then it happened. A shovel struck something soft, and a small, muddy trickle of water seeped into view. A collective, triumphant roar echoed across the plains. Soon, the trickle became a steady, clear flow, filling the bottom of the well, a liquid mirror reflecting the blue sky above. That evening, a fire burned brightly in front of Jebediah's home. The air, once thick with tension, was now filled with the aroma of roasted meat and the murmur of quiet celebration. Jebediah sat on his porch steps, a tin cup of fresh, cool water in his hands. He watched Ada talking with her grandfather, occasionally glancing back at him with a smile that bridged their two worlds. The ranch was no longer a monument to solitude and struggle. The water, flowing freely from the new well, was more than just life for his land. It was the symbol of a bond forged in kindness, a promise that he would never again be truly alone.